Welcome, 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 my lovely brothers and sisters. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the second part, which I started this morning. I'm going to try to finish it off, which is all about the nations against nations. I'm still reading from Wes Penry's The Orion book, volume 2, chapter 9. And I'm going to continue with the second part because it's quite a long chapter this time. Um, and let us see. I think I can manage it completely. All right. The sub-chapter is in actuality also known as, nations against nations, also known as Enki versus Marduk, part 2. And the human soul group used as cannon fodder and also used as pawns for their war game. Because we need to remember that we, for uncountable thousands of years, are in a war. This is something not many people want to still acknowledge because they don't see any military vehicles going through the streets. So, in the opinion of many people, there is no war. But there is indeed a war. And this war is being fought against two so-called gods. And we, human soul group, are their war battle pawns to be used and misused. And we also are their doormat and cannon fodder. So we need to wake up and we need to start gaining our sovereignty back. We need to say enough is enough. We need to stand and say, as soul group, it is done. We are not falling any longer for all these tricks, lies, and trickery and cons and whatever you have that these two so-called gods, whom are themselves sociopathic, schizophrenic, psychopathic, malignant, narcissistic, Machiavellistic, and we need to see this. So yeah, I would highly recommend you to also start to inform and educate yourselves about narcissism and sociopathy and psychopathy, because then you start to make the connectional dots in society. All right, let us start. A brief introduction to eugenics. Before we move on, it is imperative to understand that the history of eugenics and mass extinctions of so-called unwanted genetics did not start with Nazi Germany. Ironically, this movement took root long before the Second World War. In America and in England, the two main countries supposedly working against Hitler and his so-called final solution. Some instigators in the USA were Henry Ford from the Ford Foundation and Ford Motors, the Rockefellers and other elite bankers and various elite intellectuals. Henry Ford was in the forefront of promoting eugenics to the American population long before anyone knew who Hitler was. He and his lobbyists had managed to convince about 65% of the American population that it would be beneficial for humankind if people with handicaps or those mentally challenged, people with mental problems and disorders, and certain folk groups should be sterilized. So, Indiana was the first state that implemented this with the so called blessings from the majority of the American population, unfortunately. But it got even worse. People in mental asylums were deliberately given tuberculosis through their food. And this food poisoning, lovely brothers and sisters, is still continuing unto the day of today. And our food is completely hybridized. Organic food does not exist any longer, nor biological food. All food is poisoned with nanobots and whatever they are spraying in the air. Um, and they eventually died. This was too slow of a process, however, so they ended up just killing them on the spot to get it over with. Many people know that Canada was jumping on a similar bandwagon in England. Winston Churchill was also part of this entire process and supported eugenics full-heartedly. So this gives a complete different background about Winston Churchill. As the readers can see, it is all about bloodlines. So much later, Hitler and intellectuals who later were to become members of the Nazi Party connected with the American secret societies, hooked onto this as well. And Hitler wrote to certain eugenicists in America applauding their work during the Nazi years. Hitler gave Henry Ford the highest order of the Nazi Party for his great work that inspired Hitler to initiate the final solution. Ford received the so-called medal in person. Thus, Marduk and Enki have common goals, but they differ in some important details, such as in rulership. They both show very destructive and highly psychopathic traits. They are psychopaths, wanting a certain outcome that they both agree with, but they fight each other at the same time in a constant power struggle. If they were capable of working together in peace, they would much easier accomplish their goal, and we would already be in the singularity a long time ago. Instead, they destroy each other's bloodlines. Well, let them do so, I would say. So the other party has a harder time possessing their designated seed line, and therefore it is going to be more difficult to control us humans. Well, the better, and the more we as humans start to wake up to all this insanity and psychopathy, the more we also start to refuse to cooperate with these psychopaths. For us, this could be a blessing in disguise because if they continue diluting each other's bloodlines to an extent that they perhaps can no longer ride our avatars, their entire singularity also comes into huge delay, and their entire war plan against Orion comes also in a huge delay. And another interesting fact here is that they themselves then instigate more holes in the grid and thus more depletion. Wishful thinking, maybe, but it isn't. But isn't it hypothetically possible, though? Yeah, because the more psychopath they become, the more mistakes they are making. The insane migration of people around the world. So what is really going on behind this insane migration of people around the world? In a previous section, we talked about keeping bloodlines as pure as possible. So the so-called gods can more easily attach to us humans when it is time to write our avatars. Although the bloodlines are kept purer, the higher up the hierarchies we go, the man on the street is a, between quotation marks, hopeless mix. More so these days than just, let us say, 40 years ago. Since then, nations all over the world have opened their borders both for war refugees and lately for anybody. This, of course, mixes up the bloodlines even more because people now crossbreed much more between the races. Could be this also a handy thing for us? Let us see. Um, this is deliberate, of course. And as I, Wes Penry, who is the author of this book, can see it, it is because if pure blood cannot be found anymore except among the elite people, it is better to mix everything. Probably so that both Enki and Marduk respectively can attach to more human bodies than if they stick to only the few who are purer than the rest. And attach themselves to human bodies means nothing more than the possession of human bodies. This is what is going on, and there are more and more people suffering possession of the body. Their problem is that they need to be able to control about 3% of the world population, and even that seems to be a heavy task for them. All this because they fight internally. So let them fight internally. The more they are busy with internal fights, the better. Um, for us, the more delay in their plans, I would say. It is typical for psychopaths and narcissists and sociopaths and malignant narcissists, however, to act like this, which usually leads to their own failure. Oh, let them do so. Let them failure quite enough, I would say. This is what we hope for. Yes, let's hope this tremendously. Let them fail. And in the meantime, we wake up to what is truly going on. And the more of us humans are waking up to the real things that are going on and are about to see for what everything really is, the more difficult we make it even more so for them. So let's wake up. It is interesting to go back to the migration from Europe to America in the 1700s. In the beginning, there were mostly white people, Chinese and Germans mixed with the English and other Europeans. America and Canada are Enki's new Atlantis. So he wanted to occupy the North American continent through the monarchies and occupied countries under his flag. He started with the Europeans and the Asians, the Chinese being hired as so-called slave labor. And I would also highly recommend you to read this book, The Committee of 300, written by Dr. John something. But The Committee of 300, that is a very interesting book also, because the author of that book also discusses this and what has happened to the Chinese and Japanese people and how drugs was involved there to take over the people there. They were the ones who built most of the railways in the 1800s. But Enki's goal was not to bring the Marduk bloodlines to America. Oh no! Even though he was in control over some of them because of the countries he had occupied with the help from his loyal elite proxies. In fact, he wanted to mix his own African bloodline, the Enki Isis line, with the white and yellow races already living in the United States of America. Hence the slave trade. Hence the slave trade, where they brought a lot of black people into the Americas. Over time, they interbred with the white people, and thus he had his own Ham bloodline. Ham bloodline is the Enki Isis bloodline present in his Atlantis. And so, I repeat again, they are about to recreate a new Atlantis in America. So he better could control the population there and insert himself into them. And insert himself into them, which means his DNA, Enki's DNA, in the DNA of these people. Yeah. That are part of his bloodline. Up to this day, there are African Americans in the USA who are not heavily inbred with other races, which makes that bloodline quite pure. And behind the scenes, Enki can manipulate the population in his new Atlantis, which is America about to become. That is why we see the things happening in America right now. So now you understand why I am passing this information on to you. Spirit led me to the topics that I need to pass on to you. To understand better who is in control of which people, we cannot only rely on the genetics, although DNA is at the bottom of everything in this matrix. That is why in 2020 they enforced people to use these PCR tests so they could collect as much as possible DNA. Yeah! And that is also the reason why so many people were enforced to do tests and these no swabs and whatever shit they invented. And people bought into it. It is nothing more than just collecting DNA so that they can see where they need to take out people, where they need to take out certain genetic lines. That is why they are instigating all sorts of events and to make people falsely believe that they have to do all sorts of tests so that Enki and Marduk and their scientists and laboratories can see how many people are carriers of certain bloodlines. That is the main reason why also Google started to create Ancestry.com, because Ancestry.com is not what people think. Nicely know, some family history. Oh no! Ancestry.com and all sorts of related ancestral DNA informational platforms are nothing more than platforms to collect people's DNA so that they can see who is carrying whose bloodline. That is why. So do not fall for Ancestry.com, because then you are participating into something of which you do not know exactly what you're doing. So Enki's people are the black people, but it does not stop him from conquering the white race and others. just like alien species might invade and occupy other worlds. The gods do the same thing here. So this is how Enki could get white people to settle in America, because at that time England, Germany, and I believe China were all Enki territory. Although there was no black population in these countries, and if there were, they were just a few. The white people are Marduk's people, which makes the American white people vulnerable to Marduk's manipulation. So wake up. And as we can see, black and white people have disliked each other for a long time. So now we also get a deeper understanding behind these platforms of so-called Black Lives Matters and all these platforms um, that are only built to create havoc, mayhem, divide and conquer. It's all part of their game strategies. It's all part of their war strategies between Marduk and Enki themselves. All right. And as we can see, black and white people have disliked each other for a long time, to put it mildly. On a subconscious level, both races feel the other one is the enemy. Enki against Marduk, white against black. But America is Enki's answer to Marduk's intrusion in Europe. So we also are dealing with intrusion from Marduk here in Europe too. With his bloodlines, Enki wanted a genetic research center that he was in control of, which is the United States of America and also Canada, which came later. Now his influence over America is substantial, while Marduk's genetic research centers are China and Russia. Amidst all this, there are the Native Americans who have suffered tremendously. Many of them claim to be survivors from Atlantis, i.e., of Enki's bloodline. As we know, the white man wanted to murder all Indians and eventually ended up putting them in reservations. You better can say open prison systems. Here again we have the clash between Enki's people, the Native Americans, and the white Marduk people. Still, I think Enki sleeps well at night, knowing that it will play itself out in the end, and he will be on top of it as soon as things calm down. So long as people interbreed, he is happy. He has got his Atlantis. And I want to also say that we just need to think about this whole idea between Russia and Ukraine. And why is it that America is so heavily involved in Ukraine? Yeah, these are things that we need to ask questions about. And that is why I am presenting you this information, so that you can start seeing the dots and connectional lines. And so you can see that it's not about all these leaders. No, it's about a war between Marduk and Enki. All right. We must understand that almost everything here in the matrix is all about genetics / DNA. There is so much to know about this that the subject could cover a thick book. And perhaps I will write such a book one day, after having done much more research. Who knows? Either way, I think it would be worthwhile keeping in mind how important this is for the overlords and their cohorts. If it is important for them, it is also important for us, just to know that we should be happy not to be of pure bloodline, or we would be much more easily possessed. All right. I also want to state here, please go to YouTube or to the website Baruch Haba Bashem Yahuwah.net, um, and go to Truth Stream Media. Truth Stream Media on YouTube has a very good documentary, two documentaries. One is titled The Minds of Men, which is a tremendously well documentary. You also can find it on the mentioned website, Baruch Haba Bashem Yahuwah.net. And they also have a documentary in which they give background information about eugenics. And these two documentaries I highly recommend you to watch. They're loaded with very good information. And these two documentaries are really food for thought. So then we go to Maria Orsic and the Vril Society versus the Thule Society. So the Vril Society is a very interesting part of modern history. It was led by a young, beautiful woman named Maria Orsic. She was born on October the 31st. Interesting date, Halloween date, yeah. 1895 in Zagreb, Croatia. To Tomislav Thomas Orsic. Mother's name is unknown. The term Vril denotes the cosmic life force, i.e. spirit energy. Maria was a ballet dancer, among many other things, until she started receiving channeled messages so profound she teamed up with other psychic women. These ladies took Nordic names within the society, relevant to the messages they received, no doubt, from Enki's team. Maria claimed the channel originated from the star system Aldebaran in the Pleiades, where Enki has or had a stronghold. The Vril team, comprising only women, were obviously aware that the feminine energy was required for the clearest channeling, and the female body can more easily make this clear connection, exactly like my Orion source also pointed out. Unrelated to the Vril ladies, Maria also grew her hair to her ankles, understanding that hair works as an antenna through which she could transmit and receive energy from the cosmos. The Vril ladies started channeling in the 1920s, when Maria was in her late 20s or early 30s. The most profound messages she received included blueprints of something that resembled saucer-like vessels, later called the Aunebu, or Haunebu, Honeybu. None of the Vril ladies were scientists or inventors. They had no clue how these machines worked, but they were soon to find out. So in Germany, there was an organization called the Thule Society, or the Thule Gesellschaft. a secret society founded in Munich shortly after World War One. In 1918, 1 year before the Frill Society was founded by Maria Orsic. Thule was an occult society based on Nordic mythology, but they chose the name after a mythological northern country in Greek mythology. It was heavily sponsored by the Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the DAP, which later became the Nazi Party. Below is a quote from Wikipedia, which clearly states what these members believed in. So you can look this up yourselves in Wikipedia. Through the Tool Society and Thrill Society. These ideas later became the primary occult belief among the Nazi elite. People. A primary focus of the Thule Society was a claim concerning the origins of the Aryan race. In 1917, people who wanted to join the Germanic order, out, out of which the Thule Society developed in 1918, had to sign a special, between quotation marks, blood declaration of faith. Wow. Concerning their lineage. So, the signer hereby swears to the best of his knowledge and belief that no Jewish or colored blood flows in either his or in his wife's veins, and that among their ancestors are no members of the colored races. Thule, Greek, was a land located by Greco-Roman geographers in the farthest north, often displayed as Iceland. That is interesting because we know now that Iceland and Greenland are very much in the picture. Why would that be? Not only because of the military bases and possible handy military locations there. No, maybe Iceland, Greenland has the people there, the population there has some certain bloodlines in them or are of some specific DNA, genetics. Who knows? The Latin term ultima Thule is also mentioned by Roman poet Virgil in his pastoral poem called the Georgics. Thule originally was probably the name for Scandinavia, although Virgil simply uses it as a proverbial expression for the edge of the known world, and his mention should not be taken as a substantial reference to Scandinavia. The Thule Society identified Ultima Thule as a lost ancient landmass in the extreme north near Greenland or Iceland, saith by Nazi mystics to be the capital of ancient Hyperborea. Here is another brief entry from the same Wikipedia article, and we will discuss this in more detail. My emphasis. So the Thule Society has become the center of many conspiracy theories concerning Nazi Germany due to its occult background, like the Anerbi section of the SS. Such theories include the creation of Vril-powered Nazi UFOs. All right. Wes Penry, the author of this book, researched the Vril Society back in the days when I wrote the Wes Penry papers, and I included some information about it there. However, there's always more to tell, and it is indeed a fascinating story. Clearly, the Tool Society was a satanic society based on, oh yes, here it comes, Marduk's principles. It seems to me that Maria and her team were serious about their channeling and they were not Nazis at all. They unknowingly worked for Enki. They were his tools to bring technology into the world, probably to be presented to England or the United States of America. But the Tool Society got informed about these fascinating ladies. They found out the Thrill Society had blueprints of a new vehicle that ran on free energy, the universal thrill power. Therefore, they infiltrated the society and took it over. History is vague about what really happened next, but I believe most researchers agree the Nazis forced the Thrill Ladies to work for them and to reveal everything they had channeled and learned. Thus, the Nazis had the technology to build flying saucers called Foo Fighters by the Allies. That is interesting. Is there not a certain music group called Foo Fighters? So, where did they come up with the band name Foo Fighters? Interesting. Maybe there's somewhere a connection. After the war, the information on how to build these crafts went into American hands, and after that, people started seeing strange air vessels in the shape of flying saucers, capable or making odd movements and 90 degrees sharp turns. They were reverse engineered alien crafts, and the technology obviously was not supposed to come into the hand of the Nazis but the Allies. And after the Second World War, the Allies got hold of the technology. So, what happened to the Vril ladies after the war? Well, there are many rumors about what happened to Maria and the others. Maria would have been 50 years old when World War II ended. Some suggests they were killed, while others say they fled in submarines together with a crew of top-ranking Nazis and selected German soldiers to live out their lives in South America. But there is another rumor that refuses to go away, suggesting that Maria Orsic and perhaps the other Vril ladies went to Aldebaran in the Pleiades and never returned. How would they do that? Practically, if this is true, well, the only way I can think of is that they were killed or committed suicide intending to go to the Pleiades in spirit as three-unit composites. Perhaps Enki let them go to there? There are no satisfying answers to what happened to this small group of ladies. So now we go to technology transfer program and military betrayal. And I also want to suggest that you also look up some books of Joseph P. Farrell. He also is a very good informational source. These books are very, very good. So, Technology Transfer Program, the TTP, and military betrayal. It is interesting to note that only a few years after the Second World War in 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower met with two ETs at an Air Force base in California. They were supposedly the so-called Nordics. Were they? Representatives for the overlords. Eisenhower's granddaughter, Laura Eisenhower, has confirmed this encounter and spoken of it in public. But what did these Nordics want? Well, obviously, of the Enki clan, they wanted to introduce a technology transfer program, the TTP, an exchange program between the Nordics and the US government. In addition, they offered to share, between quotation marks, spiritual knowledge. If the US eliminated their nuclear weapons. Eisenhower declined because he wanted to keep the nukes. The story goes Eisenhower also met with another ET groups, and this second group were the Greys, this time most likely sent by Marduk, trying to get humans to consent to alien abductions of both humans and cattle, so they could perform DNA tests on both. This seems like an attempt by Marduk to forego or catch up with Enki's genetic science. The Greys promised to return the body safely afterward. Of course not. It is unclear whether Eisenhower agreed, but it is my impression he didn't. Instead, it later came to Eisenhower's knowledge that his own military industrial complex, MIC, went behind his back and made the deal with the Greys. Since then, the Greys and the government have mutilated cattle and abducted humans, apparently conducted horrific experiments on both. Cattle have been returned per the agreement, but eerily mutilated, done with unknown technology. Some humans are missing, but most were returned with their memories wiped out and cover stories implanted. Only during hypnosis have these innocent victims been able to recall what happened. The emotional trauma they go through during hypnosis is reportedly horrific. In his farewell speech to the nation in 1961, Eisenhower warned the American people in a public speech against the military industrial complex, stating they were taking over America and are a massive threat to the nation. So, who is behind this military industrial complex? Could it be Enki himself? I suggest because of this treaty between the so-called Greys and the MIC, the secret, and also, the secret space program, the SSP, where they transfer humans into space to become, between quotation marks, super soldiers, is just an extension of what happened during World War II. And reportedly, the secret space program is run by Germans up to this day, some of them working off planet. More about the secret space program in a later chapter. So after World War II, since Marduk had lost his power, at least temporarily, he needed new consent from his enemies, the United States. He got that consent in a clever way by contacting the military industrial complex. So, in actuality, we could say that Marduk is leading the MIC, the military industrial complex, getting permission to infiltrate Enki's technological program, even the space program. He could then, because of the American MIC's treacherous act, hijack people in their sleep and either do experiments on them or send them into space in a soul-mind state. So he transferred their astral bodies between brackets, artificial soul, because that is what the astral body is, into cloned bodies of themselves that are apparently more resilient and can better withstand the harsh conditions in space. There are many testimonies by super soldiers that spill the beans across the internet. Most of them appear credible. There is no doubt the secret space program, i.e., super soldier program, exists. The only question is what is true and what is not. We know both the military and the overlords can induce false memories known as cover memories into the victims. Most super soldiers also admit they have been viciously mind controlled. Still, I believe there is truth to their stories. The previous, between quotation marks, singularity from Pleiadian perspective. According to Barbara Marciniak's Pleiadians, there was a previous singularity in which we humans invaded the Pleiades and have created terror there up to this day. The reason the Pleiadians are here, from what they say, is because they want us to change the timeline so the invasion of the Pleiades never happened. However, I have encountered no information from the Pleiadians where they tell us when this first singularity took place, so we can only make an hypothesis out of this for now. And the following is subject to change, but the hypothesis seems quite likely if we think in the context of what we already have concluded overall. We have enough evidence from multiple sources and ancient texts that Enki started messing with genetics. By the end of the Atlantis era in the second construct. So this is how long this period of messing with human genetics DNA is going on. Very few details have survived about exactly how far Enki got before the flood interrupted him. According to the Pleiadians, the technology that was used at the end of Atlantis was impressive and more developed than the technology we have now. So the technology we have now is just kindergarten. Yeah? It's old school. It's not new. It's old school. They also mentioned that we had a well-developed space program. Then there was no grid or dome at that time. Now there is a grid and a dome. My question is, did Enki get so far as to create the first singularity and implement it to a certain degree, promising some humans they would be as so-called gods? If so, they only had time to introduce a fraction of humankind to that program. Assuming this happened, did Marduk at some point hijack the first singularity, turning humans against Enki, their so-called creator, because God the Father of the Bible, the God mentioned in the entire Bible, in the Old as well as the New Testament, is Enki. Did Marduk manipulate us into attacking the Pleiades, Enki's stronghold, attempting to so-called disarm Enki? It would be certainly be in line with Marduk's behavioral pattern. Could it be that this is when the Orions here on the planet discovered what Enki and Marduk were up to and ended the experiment before it was too late? and it would draw all humans into a new construct meant to be the so-called, between quotation marks, first singularity. This would explain why only a certain number of humans fell for the manipulation and got stuck. The flood interrupted Enki's new experiment. Then, after the flood, he and Marduk both entered the third construct, dash the matrix, and then the race toward the singularity started all over, because that there is a technological competition going on, that is also very clear. There is a race going on, because otherwise how can you explain the extreme hurry of developing technology? And why do we see such an uh, because many people are complaining that they cannot follow technology anymore. It goes so rapid, and before we know it, the new gadget is invented, a new software program is invented, and what else you have. So, but this time without Orion interference. Well, they think. But we are now in a day and age that the more people are starting to see, wake up and see the things for what they truly are, and are informing and educating themselves about what truly is going on, and the war game, the long war game that is going on between Enki and Marduk. As soon as the majority of humanity is starting to see this, this can mean that then the human soul group starts to become stronger in saying no and starting to work um, against it. And so more delay comes into play. And the human soul group is then able to maybe turn the tables. So let's get out of this victimhood, inform and educate yourselves about narcissism, about sociopathy and psychopathy. Because the more people are doing this, and I'm very thankful that there are so many people out there doing um, creating platforms in which they are informing others about narcissism and sociopathy and psychopathy. So more and more people get informed about what it is. And then you can see it all over the place in society. And then you can understand cosmic narcissism, and thus also cosmic sociopathy and psychopathy. It all goes hand in hand. And the more of us are start doing so, and the more of us start seeing the things for what they really are, yeah, then there can be a turning of tables. And then they have a huge problem. Well, I have no sorry for Enki and no sorry for Marduk, because all the things that they have done against the human soul group, that is a list, well, that is hardly to imagine, as long as that list is of the misuse and abuse of human souls. All right, and with this said, I have come to the end of part 2 of this very interesting chapter 9 of the Orion book, volume 2, written by Wes Penry. And again, go to all the links mentioned in the text box. I also will add the links of the 2 documentaries I spoke about, created and done by Truth Stream Media. Very important to see these documentaries too. And they're loaded with information. And especially now you have more in-depth information in how you can see where Marduk's hand is at play, and where Enki's hand is at play through their proxies. Huh? So I want to thank you for listening along. Thank you for tuning in through Facebook, through YouTube, through Rumble. Thank you so much. And I will see tomorrow what topic my spirit wants me to hand over to you. So I will see. And yeah, I'm very thankful to do this job because I know it is very important that we share information, and especially information that is important for us to know. All right, I leave it here, and I am saying to you the next time, and let us listen to a nice piece of music from band sound known as Echoes from the Mountains. Thank you so much for listening. I see you next time. And please share this video, all the videos that I've made so far. Thank you so much, and see you